Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order this session of our Audit Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues on Government Operations and Fiscal Policy, Council Vice President Andrew Friedson and Council Member Sydney Katz. Our Council President will be joining us shortly, but asked us to start our meeting today. So today we have our Office of Inspector General and the Office of Internal Audit with us to provide updates as you normally do at our Audit Committee meeting in the spring or early summer. What we're doing differently this year and that we're going to start doing in our Audit Committee meetings is that in addition to your overview presentations of your departments, we're also going to have a discussion of one report from each office. This will give us an opportunity to highlight the excellent work both of your departments have been doing, and our chance to talk to the departments that were audited to provide feedback on how the work is going to address the issues that you raised and whether or not there's anything this body or the County Council can do to help address some of the issues raised. And so with that, I think I will turn it over first to our Inspector General.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's nice to see all of you. I was asked to begin this morning with an overview about the Office of the Inspector General. I appreciate any opportunity to talk about our office and share with this body and the community the work we do and how we can be of assistance. The office was established in 1997 by the Council. We are an independent office in the legislative branch tasked with promoting efficiency and effectiveness in government programs, fighting and detecting fraud, waste, and abuse, and making recommendations to promote accountability. In 2020, our requirements were expanded by Bill 1119, which I've spoken about many times, and requires us to audit every principal department in county government on a rotating basis and to perform risk-based audits of those departments. We have oversight responsibility not only for county government, but MCPS, the Board of Education, the Housing Opportunities Commission, Montgomery College, and our statute says also for any other government agency for which the County Council appropriates or approves funding, sets tax rates, makes levies, and approves programs or budgets, excluding municipalities, of course. So that would be things like MCEDC or the Revenue Authority. Our office is comprised of now 3 different divisions based on the appropriations that were passed by the Council for FY24. We have an Inspections and Investigations division that responds to all of our hotline complaints and performs investigations and then does a lot of proactive programmatic reviews. We have an Audit division, which is established and has expanded over the last 3.5–4 years to meet our mandate and perform audits of all of the principal departments. And then new for fiscal year 24 will be an Educational Oversight division, which will have staff that are specifically tasked with oversight responsibilities and activities at MCPS and the Board of Education. Our office is empowered. We follow 5 core values that were chosen by our staff. They are relevance, independence, integrity, collaboration, and excellence. And we embed those values into everything we do, our work, our discussions within the office, the way we treat one another and the persons that come into contact with our office, and they really are the guiding principles for everything that we do. The overarching goal of our office is to add value through the work that we do and to be responsive to the residents and employees and stakeholders who contact us through the work that we do. We also, of course, are working to promote efficiency and effectiveness of county-funded programs, deter and detect fraud, waste, and abuse, engage in work that provides opportunities to enhance racial equity and social justice in Montgomery County, and support and cultivate a diverse, inclusive, and informed staff of experts. The type of work that we do is driven by our 4-year work plan. Statute requires that we issue a 4-year work plan several months after the appointment of the Inspector General. Our first work plan was then issued in 2021. We will issue an update this fall to announce the engagements that we will perform during the latter part of my term. Announced engagements include audits, inspections, evaluations, reviews, anything that's not an investigation generated by a hotline complaint. Our hotline investigations could range from conflicts of interest, employee misconduct, misappropriation of funds, and gross mismanagement. In the packet that was prepared for you today is a list of ongoing projects. You will see that we are currently doing work at Department of Permitting Services, the Police Department. We just yesterday issued a report on the bag tax. We are in a planning phase for an audit at the Department of Transportation. And I did find there is a correction. One ongoing engagement was left off inadvertently. We are currently completing a review of the continuity of operations in the county. And that encompassed both the executive and legislative branches. All of our work products are designed to promote accountability and transparency in government. And we must ensure that our work is of the highest quality. We want it to be objective and to have integrity and competence and independence. And to meet all of those goals, we follow what are called professional standards. And we have strict policies and procedures that we adhere to in each engagement that we perform. So in every announced engagement, again, anything that's not an investigation, we incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to our planning phase to ask questions about how these programs affect residents and how they could be possibly improved for our residents. Our audits follow generally accepted government auditing standards, sometimes called GAGAS. I've referred to it before as the Yellow Book. It is a large tomb of how we follow and perform engagements so that they do have the independence that are required, so people can rely on our work and know that it is unbiased. And for investigations, inspections, and evaluations, we follow the Association of Inspectors General principles and procedures. Sometimes we call it the Green Book. But it really is to make sure that everyone can rely on our work and knows that it is rooted in fact, and it follows a very stringent process where our biases should not come into play. We communicate the work that we do in various forms. Obviously, we have formal reports. We have done lessons learned bulletins. Last year, we did a trend analysis of all of the findings and recommendations that we had made. We issue news releases. Sometimes we issue a management alert to the administration where we've discovered something that really needs to be addressed right away, or something that hasn't risen to the level of it was part of the investigation. It was something we saw along the way that we want the administration to be alerted to so they can begin to make changes or to be aware that this is going on. So we'll send those over from time to time. We obviously have a website. We have an online intake form for our hotline. It is in both English and Spanish. We run an old-fashioned hotline. You can call us anytime. We have folks in the office with numerous language capacities, and then obviously through the county there are a number of ways to ensure that we are able to meet the needs of anyone who calls and may need different assistance or supports. We also use LinkedIn as a way to communicate with our residents and are working now to really increase our outreach as we move forward. I will stop there in case there are any questions before I move into the report that you asked me to bring forward today.
Great. Thank you so much for that update and overview of your department. I'll ask my colleagues if they have any questions at this time.
We've heard from Ms. Lamarzi before.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Lamarzi. We very much appreciate that. And so I think we can delve right into the report we asked you to highlight today. And again, thank you very much for highlighting the work of your department, and in particular when you talked about the accountability and transparency, and for our residents to know the work that you're doing. And that is also one of the reasons we wanted to do a deeper dive into one of your reports, so that the community can also know and we can highlight the work you're doing. So why don't we jump into the report?
Excellent. I know members of MCPS are also here to answer if you want them to come now or later. whichever you prefer.
Come down now.
Excellent.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today.
The report that we have brought forward today for further discussion is the abuse of purchase cards by Montgomery County Public Schools Department of Transportation employees. This was an investigatory report. It was published on December 8th of 2022. I believe many of the new council members got it about a few days within their term. This was a report where we were investigating a hotline complaint of a different nature, and while we were looking, and this happens a lot, sometimes we're looking at a specific thing and we're alerted to other issues or things that are going on in a department, and in this case at the Department of Transportation at MCPS. At the time, we learned of several investigations and issues that had come up, work that was being done related to purchasing cards and other fiscal mismanagement issues. We learned that Montgomery County Police was investigating a portion of the allegations, and so we met with them. We talked to some of the folks at MCPS, and we realized that there was an area that was not yet really being addressed. Internal audit at MCPS had begun doing some audit work. MCPS engaged an outside auditor to do a draft report and to identify potential issues, but it had sort of stopped at that point as we were coming in. Police department is looking at a separate issue related to an off-the-books account that was being used by the deputy director at DOT. And one of our charges is, again, to promote efficiency and effectiveness, to find challenges, to find weaknesses in controls, and to highlight those and bring them forward and have accountability and transparency of issues so that they can be corrected. So our scope for this report and for this investigation, we expanded the scope that was already opened by the independent auditor and the initial work they had done, expanded upon what internal audit had done, recognizing that MCPS did take some actions to correct some of the initial control issues at that point, but really looking to make sure that there was a full assessment of sort of the broader issues and whether all controls that could have been put in place would have happened. And to get an idea of just sort of how it happened, why it happened, there was such a lax. So we work to identify fraud, and we also, when we find opportunities to make recommendations for improvement, that's what we do. So that was what we were focused on in this investigation. It focused on items that had been purchased using purchase cards that violated policy. We looked specifically for items that are highly desirable, that are easily converted to personal use, or easily stolen, movable items. The objectives were to determine if there was evidence that employees had misused purchasing cards to procure items for personal use, to evaluate compliance with P-card policies and the strength of those policies and procedures. We looked at 12 DOT employee credit cards that had been used between July 10th of 2020 and June 22nd of 2022. Again, being sure that we weren't duplicating efforts. That's part of the charge, is we always have to be careful that we are speaking with other oversight bodies, entities, to make sure there's no duplication. There is a P-card program at MCPS. It is predominantly used for low dollar purchases. Now that is set for items under a value of $500. It is governed by the MCPS Purchasing Card Users Guide, which was updated in July of 2022. We started our investigation formally in May of 22. We had been involved, again, in other matters there a little before that. The Purchasing Card Users Guide had been updated in July of 2022. It had not been updated before that since 2014. Chapter 3 also of the financial manual at MCPS governs the use of purchasing cards. And at the time of our investigation, there were 1,600 P cards issued to MCPS and Board of Education staff. The manual and the user's guide prohibit certain types of purchases. They prohibit gift cards, food, restaurants, and MCPS maintains a long list of items that they have approved vendors for. So you have to use those approved vendors, and you can't use your P card to go outside of that list. So all of those were factors that we considered as we did our investigation. We, during the investigation, performed numerous interviews. We looked through reams and reams of data, lines of that. We go down to what's called level 3 data on a purchasing card, which tells you exactly what was bought. So we could try to make a determination on whether something was for personal use or not. We had to use our judgment in a lot of cases. Some of the purchases were for things like furniture. And that is something that needed to be purchased using an approved vendor. It's not supposed to be used with a credit card, but those are items that without a lot of documentation behind them, without then inventorying after, we couldn't necessarily find them. There are numerous depots at DOT. So the work we did really was to try to work through how this had gotten there. We had 6 findings in our report. We found that employees used P cards to violate policy. Again, they made furniture purchases of approximately $78,000. There was sharing of P cards. P cards are issued to one individual, and you're not supposed to share that with others and let them use that. That was happening because Mr. Ewald's threshold for what he could charge was very high at the time. And I will put a pin there for you also. Part of this did happen during COVID, so there were some lax positions that were taken with P card oversight because it was a pandemic. So normally you couldn't have items shipped to your home. If I did an investigation, I saw items being shipped to the home, that would be a serious red flag. But that had to be lax during COVID. So that created challenges. Same with spending limits were adjusted during COVID because there was such an exigent need. We also found that transactions were not being approved in the required time period. When you close out the month, supervisors should be approving within 10 calendar days of the end of the month. I told you about using vendors that they should have used contracted vendors for, buying gift cards, and we saw at least one purchase that violated state law. Under state law, any purchase for over $25,000 must be approved by the Board of Education, and that was not done for one of these. We also saw that Deputy Assistant Director Ewald purchased items that not only were prohibited by policy, but also for personal use. And DOT employees often share their purchasing card. So again, unauthorized users were allowed to use a card that was shared with higher limits. It was kept in open space, not necessarily locked up either. More findings were internal controls were not followed. Approving officials were not verifying and reconciling monthly reports. That's an important control. You need the first level supervisor. And when folks would submit their purchasing card data, they didn't always have all of the backup, the support that you need. And as we continue to look through those first line level, what I'll call, controls, we found that higher levels of review could be improved also. So another finding was that the internal audit unit at MCPS, at the Board of Ed, does not audit the central office. Department of Transportation is part of the central office unless a complaint was received. It wasn't part of their regular work plan to go and audit the purchasing card uses. And desk reviews of the schools and central office departments by the controller's office were also not always conducted within the prescribed frequency. There was MCPS had a set metric for how many offices and school systems individual schools, that they would go and look at the purchasing card and do a desk audit. A desk audit is looking at documentation. So it's a very sort of quick issue. If you find questions, then you ask them, but documents come to you and you look through those. But we found that 20 of the 31 central office departments, so 65%, had not been reviewed as they were scheduled or should have been scheduled to be reviewed. 16% had not been reviewed in even the last 2 years, so they were well outside the time frame. And in terms of the schools and the P cards that are at the schools, 50% of high schools, 21% of middle schools were only reviewed. So there was a large gap in that second level of control and oversight. So your first level is always going to be the supervisor, and then you have a second. And so we highlighted in our recommendations, we made 5 recommendations. We highlighted ways that MCPS could build upon the changes that they had already been making, a lot of which were changes to limits on cards and some oversight of review. But we made 5 recommendations: to continue to cooperate with law enforcement, to reconcile purchase transactions that Mr. Ewald had made with inventory to try to work and determine whether more items had gone missing or had been put to personal use, to implement the compliance monitoring features on the JP Morgan Chase system. That's the P card system that is used by the school system, used by the county. There are a number of features that you can implement that would give you alerts and flags, and those, we recommended that those be activated. We also recommend that MCPS ensure that desk reviews of the schools and central office department P card use are conducted within the prescribed frequency, and to develop and implement policies that would require rotational audits of P cards for central office departments and functions. If you have a plan and a requirement, you have a rotation to follow, then you'd be better assured that we would get to all the P card users or offices that may be affected. I can turn now to staff from MCPS. They have come to detail their responses and the corrective actions that they've taken thus far.
Great. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And good morning, Chairwoman Stewart, President Glass, Vice President Friedson, and Councilmember Katz. My name is Brian Hall. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for MCPS. Thank you for providing MCPS with the opportunity to share with you this morning the improvements that we have made to our processes and guidelines for staff use of purchasing cards, or P cards. I would also like to thank the Office of the Inspector General for their collaboration during the audit and their recommendations that have helped us improve our oversight and processes. We agree with the findings of the audit, and we will share how MCPS has implemented each of the 5 recommendations. So recommendation 1, continue to cooperate with law enforcement to support efforts to recoup stolen funds and equipment and prosecute violations of the law. So MCPS has fully complied and cooperated with law enforcement throughout and will continue to provide any necessary information, support that our law enforcement partners ask of us. Recommendation 2, which was to reconcile purchase transactions made with P cards issued to former MCPS Department of Transportation Assistant Director to ensure appropriate items have been captured and inventoried. MCPS Department of Transportation and the Internal Audit have worked with the OIG staff to identify and index the furniture equipment purchases made by the former Department of Transportation Administrator. Recommendation 3 was to implement the use of compliance monitoring features in the JP Morgan system to alert P card administrators of potential violations of policy. So following the OIG audit, MCPS Controller's Office worked with JP Morgan to implement the monitoring and alert feature offered by the JP Morgan Purchase Card Program. Transactions are now flagged if they are over a specific dollar amount, if the P card users were to split transactions to circumvent the transaction limits, or if purchases are made with questionable category codes or questionable merchants, such as alcohol is one example. Additionally, we implemented quarterly reviews of all transactions with pending approval, and if any transactions that are reviewed are older than 90 days, without review, that can result in cancellation of the purchase card. Recommendation 4 was to ensure that desk reviews of all schools and central office departments are conducted within the prescribed frequency. So MCPS has implemented and will continue to implement Recommendation 4 by conducting monthly desk reviews of both central office and school P-card purchases. Quarterly reviews are conducted to identify the top 25 to 50% of transactions that have pending reviews, and if the purchases have not been reviewed within 90 days, the P-card can be suspended or canceled. Additionally, MCPS has required all P-card holders to take updated training on new P-card rules and procedures. I, in fact, just completed my updated training yesterday, and it was riveting. Recommendation 5. Develop and implement written policies requiring rotational audits of P-cards for central office departments and functions. Following the recommendation of the OIG audit, MCPS Internal Audit Unit has created timelines for conducting central office audits of JP Morgan purchase card users. We are in the process of updating our financial manual and are on schedule to have it completed over the summer, which will allow us to share the revised manual with central office and school administrators prior to the start of the 23-24 school year. So again, I thank the Office of the Inspector General for the recommendations. As you can see, we have gone through and implemented all 5 of the recommendations that were made, and so I will stop there and turn it back over to the committee if there's any questions.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for that, both of you, for those thorough reports. And I'll note, I appreciate one of the things I looked at was how often the trainings were done, and it looks like there's annual certification. So I just wanted to underscore that for folks. One question I had is, Ms. Lamarza, you said there were about 1,600 P-cards when you began looking at this. Is that still the case, that you have about 1,600 P-cards?
No, we've reduced that amount. It's down to closer to 1,200 now.
1,200, great. And who, if you could just review first, who does receive a P-card generally?
Yep, I will turn to Mr. Riley to talk a little bit more in detail about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, generally department and divisional directors will have a P-card for purchases within that office. As for principals, we don't recommend that, because then that goes to a level, that approval level kind of gets bogged down, it gets bottlenecked. So we recommend that their ASMs control the P-card, and then they are the approver of that.
Thank you. I will turn it over to my colleagues now. First, Council Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the OIG, and thank you to MCPS for all your work on this. Obviously not an easy issue to work through. I see this really as 2 issues that are related. One issue is a system that had holes in it and needed to be fixed, and we need to talk about that today. And the other is a very bad actor who exploited this system that had holes in it, knew what the holes were, or at least tested the limits of what those holes were, among other transgressions, and that's another issue. But it, to me, speaks to the reason why we need the systems to work well, because most people, the overwhelming majority of people who work in the school system and who work in county government, are honest, hardworking people, but it only takes one person or a very small number of people to exploit a system that has holes in it. And it's for the honest folks that we need to make sure that the system generally works, so that the very small number of individual very bad actors don't take advantage. And clearly that seems to be what has happened here. So my first question is, I just want to be clear, how did the Inspector General, because it is kind of 2 different issues, and one, there was a criminal investigation that is, I'm not aware has fully been completed through the full process, and then there's also a P-card investigation more broadly as well, and this covers both, really, at least as far as I can tell. How did the Inspector General's office become aware of the issue? Is it through the transportation administrator, and those issues, as part of that investigation, the P-card issues were raised and a broader investigation occurred, or was there a complaint of the P cards that ultimately led to finding the issue with the transportation official?
We were following up on a report to our hotline, a complaint that related to the Department of Transportation, a different issue there. And when we go in and we start asking questions, immediately folks said, you know, the police are looking at this, or the police are involved. They were involved in something different. So we followed through and spoke to our counterparts at the police department so that we could understand what they had done and what they were looking at and get a broader sense of what was going on. Then once we knew that these issues had come to light, we were concerned to make sure that, like you said, that the holes had actually been filled. Part of the P card theft is part of the proffer that was put forward at the plea for Mr. Ewald last month or so, in addition to other fiscal issues that were raised.
So there was a criminal investigation that was occurring about the potential for embezzlement, and you were tipped off, that was separately, that you weren't involved in. There was separately concerns raised about issues in transportation related to purchasing cards or other issues, and then you realized that they actually were related because the other issues actually spread into purchase card issues as well?
I'm sorry. We were looking at a procurement issue at Department of Transportation, and while we were making inquiries about that, we were alerted that the police department was already looking at some fiscal mismanagement in the Department of Transportation. So when we spoke with them and understood the extent of what they were looking at, my question was, is there a gap in what they're doing, what the private audit firm had done that would require us to go in, and could we add value at that point? And frankly, transparency. This was to ensure that there was transparency and follow through, and through the report you've heard of the steps now that MCPS has added. Again, they had started to add a number of protections. Our concern was, if that first line fails, a very robust control environment has the next level. And that's what a lot of our recommendations do, is focus on that next line, because it is a case study. Everyone gets lax with their oversight and the controls. It's trust. We've known this person forever. They've never done anything. But it is through those very basic things that at least questions start to be asked. And when questions are asked, if the first line supervisor had really been approving and looking over the credit card statements on a regular basis, if nothing else, one would hope that would have raised questions, and that can deter also. So it is a global, there's an ecosystem to the control environment, and that was why we then went in a more narrow space.
I see, pursuant to one of the recommendations, that you've gone through and reconciled the furniture and the inventory to make sure all of that has been recouped. Where are we in the stolen money, non-furniture dynamics, in terms of making sure that all the funds have been recouped?
So, as we're here today to talk specifically about the P card issue, as far as the other issue goes with the off the books account, I guess we're not fully prepared to discuss that today. We have recouped the majority of that money, I know, for certain, but we didn't bring the details of that with us today.
No problem. Obviously, we'd like to follow up on that as well.
Yep.
On the P card issue, the recouping is just of furniture, or there are other things that have been purchased with the P cards that were inappropriate that have to be recouped?
There were other things, and those as well have been captured and inventoried to the extent possible.
And how do you handle a situation where somebody purchases something for personal use that doesn't have, furniture, maybe you can repurpose furniture and use it for an educational need in the school system, and so recouping has some level of value to the school system. But if somebody purchased something with a P card that was inappropriate and has no educational use, are we getting financial compensation for that? If somebody charges inappropriately $1,000 to a P card for a personal item that the school system doesn't want, returning the $1,000 item serves no benefit to the school system. They should owe the school system $1,000, plus be penalized for their discretion.
So let me turn to staff here to see if they can provide details on some of those smaller personal items as you.
Yeah, I'd just like to start off. So that does happen sometimes unintentionally, right? So then we would be billing the card holder for that if it's for personal use. But I'm going to pass it on to internal audit.
Yeah, and I just want to separate. I mean, of course, sometimes somebody grabs the wrong card, makes a mistake. They're at CVS. They're have kids. They're distracted. They make a $7 purchase that's wrong. It gets noticed. You just say, pay back the $7. We'll document it, and it's fine. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who are intentionally using a P card inappropriately, and it seems like chronically.
Yeah, so we did find it when we looked at the transportation audit. We tried to work with the transportation to try to locate all of these items. Many of them we did locate and did get barcoded, and then there were some that we just could not locate. Some were small ticket items, some were, a little bit larger, but we couldn't prove where they were. We have 5 depots. We looked, we couldn't find them. I don't know if it's part of the other investigation, but some of them are small. With the Amazon gift cards we did get back, and the Home Depot card we did get back. There were small things like a headrest or a socket for an iPhone. There was 1 or 2 Bose speakers that we couldn't locate, but we weren't 100% sure where they were or if the employee had taken them.
Okay, and if we can't locate them and we can't use them, are we adding that to the restitution that the employee has to provide to make the school system whole? And that's really what I'm speaking to here. I mean, you purchase something that you want, that the school system didn't ask for and doesn't need inappropriately, returning it is not of value. So if you're not prepared to talk about it today, if you could give that some thought and come back to us, 'cause I think it's an important point, and maybe these are small ticket items, but in the aggregate, it's not insignificant. And I think the principle of the fact is, if you've taken something, spent money that isn't yours, you need to pay the money back.
Can we bring a follow-up back to
Sure.
this team, especially around those pieces that our staff has articulated that we were not able to find? As shared, we did cooperate and go through all of our depots, where all of our buses are, looked in all of our areas in terms of the items that we know were purchased. The ones that we weren't able to find, we would love to be able to give you a follow-up on that, especially in cooperation as you talk about the law case that's going on.
That would be
at this
great. I
moment.
appreciate it. You mentioned earlier about you now are flagging some of these items earlier on in the process. What does that mean? Does it get flagged in the system where it goes red? Does somebody else get alerted? Is it automated, or is it relying on the supervisor for it to be flagged? Could you just explain what flagging means? I think, as the OIG was noting, that's really a critical component of fixing the issue, is not relying on an individual, one individual to oversee another individual, but to have a system that is catching these things.
Yeah, and for this item, I'd like to especially thank Ms. Lamarzi and her team, because that is something that it's automated, right? It's something that we should have been utilizing all along. So that does help in the desk review portion. So we will get alerted of these type of transactions while we're doing desk reviews, or independently as well too. And along the line of desk reviews, Ms. Lamarzi mentioned here we had a failure on that first level, right? That first approver should have been seeing this and determining these are not correct transactions. But to the point of desk reviews, that is how we actually ended up finding this particular situation during a desk review that rose to the level of bringing it to internal audit, forensic auditors, and OIG. So it's a tool, right? It's
Yeah.
a tool which saves us money because we don't have to manually go in there. It'll alert us when these situations happen. For instance, for our $500, if we see multiple purchases of $499, the system will get a notification from JP Morgan, from our vendor.
Got it. Okay, so that's really important. Obviously, strengthening that system, automating it, making sure it's not relying on an individual. I'm wondering, on the front end, there are kids' credit cards that are really debit cards that parents can put all kinds of restrictions on the cards of what they can purchase, how much they can purchase, and they just get rejected at the point of sale. So I'm just wondering, do we do that? because I mean, it seems to me, in this current era, the idea that someone could have $500 limit on their card and exceed that limit, and that it even would be possible to do that, is crazy to me, because there are ample options on the market that J.P. Morgan and others provide that would prevent that from happening in the first place.
In that we have done. Those were controls that we had in place for limits. It would kick back if they tried to exceed their limit, or if it was a purchase or a code that, such as alcohol, as Mr. Hull mentioned, that would kick out, and we would know that. But these other additional capabilities that was brought to our attention, they're even
Okay,
more
so we're doing
valuable.
both. We're doing both is
Right.
the answer. Okay,
Correct.
great. All right, with that, I'll yield back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. First, I'll go to Councilmember Katz and then Council President Glass.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here with us, and for OIG and everyone else involved in this discussion. And obviously, we're all concerned that this happened, and but we also need to focus on what happened, and then it never happens again. And I know that's exactly what we're working on. And to Council Vice President Friedson's point, the vast majority of our fine employees are just as upset, if not more upset, that this has happened as we are. So we need to work through this. And obviously, some people realized that there was a great flaw and vulnerability involved in this and took advantage of it. And it's just upsetting that this happened. You've answered a couple of my questions already. How often do you do an audit? And you're saying you're doing that every 30 days now? Is that what the answer is on that?
So I'll let our internal audit talk about the frequency of those audits.
So for school audits, which is what we were mostly focused on, we do a full JP Morgan audit during a regular school audit, and we audit every high school every year. So even though the controller's office may not have been doing the desk reviews, we're reviewing JP Morgan purchases at every high school every year. Middle schools, we audit them every 18 months, and elementary schools, we go every 3 years. We also go when there's a new principal. So we are doing a lot of the JP Morgans at schools. We didn't have the staff or the ability to do all the central offices that we would like to. When this came to light, we added into our audit plan that we would try to get between 2 and 4 full JP Morgan audits done in central office. So we've started to implement that.
And that's including the P cards? The P cards are not separate from the rest of that audit?
When we do a school audit, we look at a wide variety of things, and the purchase card or P card is part of that audit. So we have a whole section, and we look at every card holder, we look at their limits, we look at 6 to 8 months of transactions. We also look at the processes. Are they being reviewed? Are they being approved? Are they being done timely? Are they doing everything that they're supposed to be doing?
Well, if I could suggest, once a year is a long time. If someone has larceny in their heart, and so if there could be, to Council Vice President Friedson's point, if there could be that red flag that says a card holder has been using their card, if the average school is using it 10 times a month and they're using it 40 times a month, then somebody needs to say, we got to look at that person. And so if that could be one of the safeguards, I think would be logical. I was a retailer, and that was the first thing they taught you, is that the person who checks out your register at night shouldn't be the same person every day, and you need to have checks and balances. So I think that works. I mean, when and I guess Ms. LaMarcy mentioned that there was $78,000 worth of transactions at $500 a transaction. That's 150 transactions. I mean, I understand it's over a large area and whatnot, but that's a lot of transactions to get to 78,000. Were there any of the in that $78,000? Was there anything over the $500 limit? Did vendors approve that?
And if I could just make a point too, in addition to the full audits that were discussed here, as recommendation 4 in the report we're also doing monthly desk reviews, which is a similar type of review, maybe just not quite as in-depth as a full audit. And then I will turn to staff to answer your last question.
So also, in the beginning, Mr. Ewald had a very, very high balance. He had a $20,000 limit, and that's how he was able to buy the furniture. When this came to light, we automatically froze the cards, and that's when the controller determined that we were going to move everyone back to what we had originally started, which was $500 per transaction and $1,500.
So
for
he
the
had a
month. He
$20,000
did.
transaction amount, not a limit on his card, but $20,000 per transaction?
Per transaction, and I believe it was $20,000 per month.
Whew.
And just, Mr. Katz, it is an example of just the changes that have needed to be made. Mr. Ewald actually had 2 cards, and I think at one point his single transaction limits were very high, near $50,000. So it was a number of factors that allowed him to do it without any red flag going up. The high, super high transaction limits and card limits at the time were definitely a part of it.
And where are you in the criminal side of this? Has that been completed?
That's handled by the state's attorney's office.
Yes.
And there is a restitution and sentencing hearing in September. So some of your questions previously about the restitution and the outstanding value that could be attributed back to Mr. Ewald, and part of that may be part of that conversation too.
And the vendors themselves, have you found that any vendors during this were a party to some of this shenanigans?
So the biggest one would be not related to the P cards, but the we'll call it the off the books account that Mr. Friedson alluded to, and that was one of the bus vendors that we no longer directly do business with.
Okay, and I'm going to stop on this, but I've always found that you should not have the same auditor check it every time. If you have a supervisor working with the person who is looking to do the wrong thing, and the supervisor is a part of that, you know what I'm saying here, is a party to that issue, I would think that you would want to, on a monthly basis, have someone else other than that supervisor check those cards, those transactions, because it's just it's too easy, and especially if it's a $20,000. It doesn't take long to get to $78,000 at $20,000 clip, and I understand why you would do it. Obviously, they had needs that exceeded $500 each time, but there just has to be. I mean, it's just asking for someone who has, as I say, larceny, as in the words of Jimmy Carter, larceny in their hearts. I'm changing a little bit, larceny in their hearts to do this. So I applaud you for trying to figure out. I mean, this is something that each one of us wants to make sure that it never happens again, and we certainly want to be your partner in this. That we don't want this to happen again either. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. If I could, I just want to have you restate what the limits are now in terms of individual purchase and overall spending, just so we have clarity on what you have right now in place.
Sure. So it's a $500 per transaction limit and a $1,500, is it monthly? $1,500 monthly limit.
Okay. Thank you. Council President Glass?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And I just want to start by expressing my appreciation for the committee and for Chair Stewart for having this conversation. I have thought for far too long that the Audit Committee could be doing much more. And I'm glad that under her leadership, we are now having regular engagement with OIG. As I noted when I became president of the council, I suggested to all of my colleagues, and particularly the chairs, to use our roles in an oversight capacity much more robustly than had previously been done, and thank you. This is exactly what we should be doing, and as chair of the T&E committee, I will be having regular conversations with the Inspector General and her team as well, and I suggest all other chairs do. I appreciate the questions that my colleagues have asked, which really went into detail the questions I had. Two outstanding questions, though. I couldn't see it in the documents, and I'm not sure if it was mentioned. What is the banking institution associated with these cards? Who's MCPS's bank?
So our M&T is our operational bank. JP Morgan is the P card.
Got it. I had heard JP Morgan referenced. I didn't know if that was a reference to the auditor or whatnot, but they are cards through JP Morgan. Okay. And the reason I asked that, and it was a spinoff of Vice President Friedson's question about modern credit card technology being able to flag suspicious transactions, right? So wanted to see, and JP Morgan certainly knows what they're doing. They've been around for a while. The other outstanding question I had was, before this situation occurred, there were approximately 1,600 P cards, and that's been reduced to about 1,200. Is that what I heard? Can you describe the personnel who have access to the P cards? I'm not sure if I saw what the criteria for a P card holder might be.
Sure. Mr. Riley?
Yeah, card holders are, throughout the system. Like I had mentioned, division and departmental directors, but also secretaries as well. So the reason that went down so much is what we did was, I think it was a recommendation from OIG, is look at usage over the past 18 months, and any cards that weren't used, we took away. So that's a lot of that reduction was based on usage. But they're used across the system, mainly for purchases 500 and under, because it does save us money rather than going through the.
Of course, and clearly the reduction, the 25% reduction or so, was a result of your internal review and recognizing that 1,600 cards were too many. So I think that's good. And as it relates to MCPS as a whole, I'm just doing back the envelope math. That's about 5% of MCPS staff have access to P cards, but mostly in managerial or administrative positions. Is that right? Okay. Okay. Again, clearly there were were bad actors that saw the loopholes. Loopholes, as of this point, have been tightened, if not closed. P card access has been further restricted. Those are all good things, but we need to continue monitoring, right, and remaining vigilant. We just had a very robust budget conversation in which we talked about every penny within the county budget and within MCPS's budget, and we want to make sure that every penny is used efficiently and legally. And so I appreciate this conversation, appreciate the work, and thank you again, Chair Stewart, for holding this hearing.
Great. I think Council Vice President Friedson has one more follow-up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks again to you for holding this and everybody for being here. I just wanted to make a fine point on something that Councilmember Katz said, and pick up on what Council President Glass was just saying. So there's 1,200 now. There were 1,600. There's 1,200. It seems like one of the ways you weeded it out is just looked at a number of people had cards that they just weren't using. So obviously they didn't need them because they weren't using them and they had them. So you took them back, because why assume that level of risk, even a modest level of risk, for something that's not necessary, which I think makes sense. But has there been an additional review of what are the types of purchases that are happening and whether or not they're necessary? And also, I don't know that we got full understanding here, but for instance, how do you request a P card? Is it that if you're in a certain classification of position, you get a P card? Is it every school gets one P card and the principal gets to determine who the designated P card holder is? How does that work? Is it the same across all of MCPS, or is it decided on a department by department basis? how is the decision made of who has access to a P card, and how now that you're at 1,200, who are those 1,200 and why?
So,
Thank
Thank you
you.
for that question. We are continuing to review our processes, who has cards, why they have them. I personally don't even have a card. I took the training because I'm an approver. So we really only do give cards to people that have a legitimate need for them. And as Mr. Riley noted, for small purchases, it really is not only more efficient, but it saves us money because we do have a lengthy purchasing requirements if you're going through and issuing a purchase order every time you need to purchase something. And so we do continue to look at who has the cards, why they have them, and then just in our procurement department generally, other things that we can do to really kind of tighten up our processes. One of the things that we did within the past year was move the entire purchasing department, which had lived in operations, over to Mr. Riley, our Associate Superintendent of Finance. So it elevated the department a little bit, providing a little bit more direct oversight from Associate Superintendent and from myself as the Chief Operating Officer. And so I'll let Mr. Riley speak a little bit more in detail about how we determine which employees should have access to P cards.
Yeah, and it is at the school level. It can be determined by the principal. Our application form has to be signed by a supervisor. So at that point, they should be looking at who's going to be making these purchases for the school, or at a department level, who's going to be the one doing these purchases. And as Mr. Hull said, they're going to take training as well as that immediate supervisor approver.
And is it different school by school? Like at some schools it's one position, in other schools another position?
Yeah, we find it different at all schools. We, again, encourage principals not to have cards. Usually the financial agent will have a card, a business administrator might have a card, a lot of times building service will have a card, and then occasionally we'll have club sponsors, like maybe the drama sponsor will have a card. The food consumer, we teach restaurant management and that kind of stuff. They'll maybe have a card. And we have cards that are not only budget cards that are attached to their instructional materials, but schools can have an IAF card, which is their independent activity fund, which is the funds that the school raises and keeps in their checking account. They'll have a card that's attached to that. So every school is different. Some schools don't have any, they don't want to deal with it, and some schools may have 5 or 6 employees that have cards.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Katz?
Which just made me think about this, but so each of these cards can only be used with a certain vendor or with the list of vendors. In other words, if someone decides that they want to go out to a restaurant and they're not one of the vendors, then this card would be rejected anyhow. Am I right in that?
Restaurants are restricted. So if they tried to use it at a restaurant, it would get rejected.
But so it's the list of vendors that is I mean, like Vice President Friedson was saying, if somebody goes to CVS, if CVS is not one of the listed vendors, then would that card go through?
It's categories of vendors. So there's certain types of vendors that are allowed.
So it's not individual vendors.
It's not the individual vendors, but restaurants overall not allowed. Liquor stores overall obviously not allowed.
I thought it was actually a list of vendors, but yeah. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no more questions, I thank you for your time and ask, as we said before, to come back and address some of the other questions that were raised today, perhaps after September. I think you mentioned when the criminal case will be completed. And again, I just want to thank you for this. I think it is very important for members of our public to see the follow-up and all the diligent work that you're doing to address what was raised in the OIG report. So I thank you for your time and the continued partnership. Thank you. All right, Mr. DeFazio, I think we're now moving over to the Office of Internal Audit for their update and the report we asked them to review today. And I'll remind my colleagues and folks watching that we do have the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee right after this. So. Okay, we can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you today to give an overview of, actually there are three things we're talking about, giving an overview of the Office of Internal Audit, not the other internal audit that you just heard about, and then to go through a review of the report that we were asked to bring forward and brief you on today. And then the third item will be looking ahead what our planned internal audit activities will be for fiscal year 24. The Office of Internal Audit actually is established in county charter. It's also codified in the county code, and the county code identifies quite well the duties that this office performs. We periodically conduct risk analyses of programs and operations and systems within the county. Based on those risk analyses, we actually conduct specific targeted audits or reviews of specific operations. We do provide advice to county departments on internal control issues. We communicate actions necessary to enhance accountability. And then, as necessary, we conduct other investigations and audits as directed by the Chief Administrative Officer. One of the items that's not codified in the list of duties that we do perform is we do track performance on bringing corrective actions to completion as timely as possible. It's one of the things I think departments dislike about us most, because we're back to them on a regular basis, encouraging them to, despite resource pressures and other challenges of their day-to-day operations, to focus the time and attention on taking the corrective actions and implementing them timely. You heard Ms. Lamarzi use the term control environment. That's a lot of what this office does. We focus on what is the control environment that exists. Are there weaknesses or gaps in that control environment that need to be addressed? And then usually following it up with specific testing of those controls to ensure that they're working effectively. All of our audit reports are posted on the county executive website. We do, as I mentioned, an ongoing monitoring program working with departments to ensure that whether there is an internal audit report that's issued, whether it's an inspector general report that's issued, that there is a corrective action plan that is developed. And then we monitor progress on completion of those corrective actions. We first of all make sure that that corrective action plan is responsive, and we believe that we make a determination in coordination with the department that if those actions that they've spelled out are taken, will they in fact address the underlying issue that was found through the audit. We are required, we were doing this already, but the Bill 1119 requires that we provide, develop and provide to the council by the 1st of June of each year an annual work plan. We were developing that annual work plan. It was shared internally within the executive branch. This bill changed that to ensure that it was shared with the council, and we're looking forward to an opportunity to hear any feedback, etc., that you might have with respect to that planned scope of audits for fiscal year 24 when we get to that point. The audit plan, just to give a little bit of insight into how we develop it, we do a risk assessment. I'll just say it tends to be an environmental scan of where are there potential risks that are there. We use complaints that have come into the OIG hotline that have been referred over to for investigation to the county. Any trends there. We also take the results of audits that Inspector General's office conducts. If they are finding an issue in a given department, we're going to assume that there may be a broader set of problems in other departments or at the county-wide level that we should take a look at. And we also rely on the internal audit firm that we contract with who conducts most of the audits. They're involved in supporting internal audit services for other jurisdictions, private sector organizations. They keep their finger on the pulse of what are the trends that they're seeing and vulnerabilities and risk areas that they're seeing in the broader government and private sector. We put those together, we run those proposed audit focus areas through the Inspector General to make sure we're not that we're collaborating with them, not duplicating any efforts that they're already engaged in and or are planning to undertake during the year that's coming up. The county had established a county risk governance committee, which is comprised of the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, the Director of OMB, the Director of Finance, the Director Office of Procurement, the County Attorney, and the Director of the Technology Enterprise Business Solutions Department. We also asked them to identify, are there areas of risk that you're aware of or are concerned about that we should be reflecting in the areas that we target for review and audit in the upcoming year. And then with respect to the actual targeted planning approach is we had established back in 2021 for what I've labeled enterprise operations, things like procure to pay, things like purchasing card, things like cash management, where almost every department is doing those operations at some level, and where there are central business offices such as the Department of Finance or the Office of Procurement that are responsible for establishing the county-wide control environment, making sure that the internal controls and processes are in place, but then they're actually administered within the individual departments. We generally take a look at the county-wide control environment that exists initially to determine if there are any gaps in controls or potential deficiencies in controls. We don't do testing at that point in time. We do generally follow those risk assessment reviews up with targeted testing that's done where we actually sample transactions, pull transactions to determine whether the controls that are in place are in fact working as they were designed to. I'm not going to talk about the 2024 internal audit plan at this point. I'll talk about that at the end. We have shared in the packet the ongoing reviews that we have in place. Right now, you'll see that there are 2 cash management internal control reviews underway, one at alcohol beverage services and the second at police department. An area of focus that over the last couple of years that we've had the internal audit services firm focus on is the IT environment. It was an area that we felt that whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's ransomware, that there are concerns out there about did we have a robust IT control environment in place. And so we have an ongoing IT governance evaluation that's underway right now. And then the 4th ongoing review is the county is getting ready to begin negotiations starting in October of this year with Marriott as part of their, I think it's a 10-year management agreement that the county has with Marriott with respect to operating the conference center. There's an audit that is done to support the county's negotiations going into those negotiations. We'll be wrapping that up in the next month or so and giving that information to the other part of the county executive's office that has responsibility for that agreement. The table that's we've shared with you reflects that there's always I'm reflecting back on some of the discussions that all of you had been in on committee and the council with respect to FTEs, that there's an ebb and flow process with FTEs. You get a position hired, somebody leaves. Similarly, with report recommendations, we work actively with the departments to close recommendations, but then there are new audits that are conducted and new recommendations that come out of that. Generally, we have been around 89–90% of completion of open audit recommendations at any time we take a snapshot on it. We do a quarterly review of where departments are in their progress, and then we've provided this update report to you on a regular basis. I'm going to stop there. That's the overview before we move into the discussion on the vendor administration review that was done in 2022, just to see if there are any questions overall on the scope of what we do and how we do it.
Great, thank you for that. Any questions at this time? No? Let's jump into the report.
Colleagues from the Department of Finance and the Office of Procurement, while the Department of Finance was the principal focus of the vendor administration review that was conducted, for one of the findings and recommendations, the Office of Procurement does play a major role in that, so they'll be here to give an update and answer questions that you have once I've gotten through the overview of the report itself. I actually want to start off with the bottom line to the review is that there are controls and processes in place on this process area, which is part of the procure to pay. Procure to pay is the shorthand that we, or P2P is the shorthand that the county uses for planning for and contracting to acquire goods and services, paying, invoicing for goods and services provided, and then an underlying piece is the vendor administration. How does a contractor get authorized to do business with the county? Back in 2019, we had conducted a fraud risk assessment for the across-the-board procure-to-pay program to identify what the control environment was at that point in time across the three phases that I mentioned, and then coming out of that, a targeted set of reviews focusing on the contracting process, and then the payment process, and then the third piece of that was the vendor administration process. Again, overall, the risk assessment identified that there are established controls and established control environment with both preventive and detective control activities designed to mitigate fraud risks. We didn't do testing as part of that 2019 assessment. The individual reviews, the three that I highlighted here, are where we conducted the actual sampling and testing of transactions. With respect to the vendor administration process, it's not my intention to do a deep dive on what that process is overall, but I think it's important to understand some of the pieces of it so that you can place into context the findings and recommendations that came out of the review. The vendor administration process, as I mentioned earlier, is involved with how a contractor gets to do business with the county. And you have to go through a registration process initially. Then there is a maintenance phase where a vendor can make changes if they change address or have other changes. And then there's a vendor inactivation process that goes on. The vendor setup or vendor registration process, potential vendors enter information into a system that the Department of Finance administers. Overall, the vendor registration system, vendor administration system, is the responsibility of the accounts payable division, I guess it is, within the Department of Finance. The county, after a vendor has input their information, does conduct a series of reviews and essentially tests to confirm that the information that the vendor has entered is in fact valid. Things like, is it a valid address? Is it a valid TIN number? The county also generates a Dun & Bradstreet Supplier Risk Manager excerpt out of the Dun & Bradstreet report that's available. Not all vendors are registered, or information on all vendors is, all vendors don't have an entry in the Dun & Bradstreet system, but where it is, there's an excerpt out of that. We'll come back to that later in terms of the findings and reviews. And then once vendors are actually in the system and are authorized to do business with the county, there are some specific ongoing checks that the that accounts payable performs. They check on an ongoing basis a vendor against the Office of Foreign Assets Control to make sure that that vendor is not on a sanctioned list from OFAC. And then there's also a monthly audit that's conducted to ensure that a registered vendor is not also a county employee. And if they are a county employee, they go down a separate path onto this, essentially this ethics hold path that we've mentioned in the report. And then finally, and briefly, there's a vendor inactivation set of processes that if a vendor has been inactive, i.e. they haven't been doing business for periods of time, we don't want to keep them around in the system for obvious reasons, and so they're inactivated, and their information is kept, but they're not allowed to do business when they're in inactive or deactivated status. With respect to the review itself, it was conducted from November 21 through April 22. We use judgmental and random selection, which basically means that random means you're trying to get a random sample, but judgmental essentially means that there may be specific areas where the auditors feel we want to dig a little bit deeper than what the random sample would have allowed us in specific areas or specific set of issues. Again, overall, there is a good control environment in place, but as with any audit, particularly in situations where there are resource challenges, there are opportunities that the auditors found to enhance the current control environment that's in place and operated. There were a total of 5 findings resulting in 7 recommendations. I'm not going to talk about all of the specific recommendations, but the areas of findings were segregation of duties, which folks had highlighted in the previous presentation. It's always a challenge again of when you're resource constrained, how do you make sure that there's an independence and autonomy of somebody looking over the shoulder of the person who has the responsibility for the prime responsibility for taking certain actions. And so we were recommending certain actions to strengthen the ability or look at the opportunities to improve segregation of duties from what was in place at the time. There were also certain limitations that had been identified in the Oracle system to be able to provide reports or to track and enhance the controls that are in place. The ability to use automated tools as a means of easily looking over the shoulder, essentially from a second set of eyes looking at things, was an important aspect of what the auditors identified should be examined and enhanced going forward. I mentioned previously the Dun & Bradstreet. It didn't appear during the course of the review that the county had developed and implemented a process to fully utilize the Dun & Bradstreet review procedures and the information available under Dun & Bradstreet, or to convey information and have a standard process to be used for how the information that was available through Dun & Bradstreet could be effectively used in the ultimately the selection of vendors for contracting purposes. Vendor maintenance, one of the things that we see oftentimes in the reviews that we conduct is a lack of documentation. I think we all suffer from when we don't have time to do everything, documenting the processes and procedures that we're going to follow tends to go at the end of the list, the bottom of the list of priorities. And so one of the set of recommendations had to do with enhancing the documentation available for the review protocols, et cetera. That ensures from an audit perspective that it's clear what do you say you're going to do and how are you going to do it. It also mitigates against when there's turnover, any drop-off on the rigor of which the processes are conducted. And then finally, I had mentioned earlier the ethics review. It was not clear that the intended ethics check, if you would, or the ethics hold process was being consistently followed. We found some inconsistencies when we talked to the Ethics Commission versus talking to Department of Finance about their understanding of that process, and so the recommendation was make sure that process is made clear, make sure it's documented, make sure that the roles of who's doing what in that process are clearly understood and are being followed, and that there's a review to ensure that they are being followed going forward. That's an overview of the audit itself, the review itself. I don't know if you have any questions right now or whether you'd wish to turn for an update on where the departments are in responding to the recommendations.
Why don't we turn to the departments and you can give us an update on where you are.
Thank you. I'm Karen Hawkins, the Chief Operating Officer with the Department of Finance, and I'd like to introduce the two individuals from Finance that I have with me. Karen Smith is our Accounts Payable Manager, and next to her is Adora Azubike, who is our new Controller, at least as of about 6 weeks ago. So while we provide you an update on the status excuse me, of implementing the recommendations, I may turn to Karen, for example, the other Karen, so you've got two Karens here, for additional clarification or information. And then I would propose, if it's okay, of the 7 recommendations, 6 of them are primarily owned by the Department of Finance. So I was going to propose that we run through those 6 first. Of those 6 recommendations, make sure I got the count right, we have fully implemented 5 of them, and 1 of them we are in the last stages of implementing. So the first recommendation talked about opportunities to limit segregation of duty limitations. What that really meant is, and to add on to what Mr. Brogley has said, the vendor administration program is within the accounts payable section or program of the Controller Division. The accounts payable program is also responsible for approving and processing payments. There must be a segregation of duties between those individuals that have the ability to process payments and any individuals that have the authority and access to make changes to our vendor file. So those segregation of duties exist, those segregation of accesses and authorities in the system. But because of that, we have a very limited amount of resources that are able to focus on the vendor administration. So we took a multi-pronged approach to our corrective action plan for identifying opportunities to limit those segregation of duties limitations. The first thing we looked at was, were we able to take any of the responsibilities performed by that key individual and assign them to other individuals to break out, part of that work. And what we evaluated was breakout of work between other individuals in the accounts payable section and other individuals outside of accounts payable. There were not feasible opportunities there because we would have violated segregation of duty controls in assigning work and broadening access of people who are processing payments and giving them access to update the vendor file. We also determined that providing that access to individuals outside of accounts payable would actually have given them broader access, and we felt that would broaden the risk. So what we did was we focused instead as the second step contained in recommendations 2 and 3. We're evaluating the opportunities to expand and create monitoring reports, so audit trail reports, of the changes made to the vendor file, and then implementing a review, a management review of those changes. And I'll go into those in a little further detail in a moment. What we also looked at was ways to, and those are some of the recommendations that we fully implemented. The one recommendation that we still have open is we were identifying opportunities to take procedures and processes that our vendor file processor performed manually and to instead automate them. So to implement more of the robotics process automation, or RPA. So our accounts payable program has worked closely with our finance IT group, which has implemented RPA in not only a number of other areas, but Montgomery County has been a leader nationally in implementing RPA in our financial processes, and our group has presented made presentations at a national and local level, for example. And so we have identified several opportunities to take processes that are manual right now and to automate those. What that will do is that will eliminate, the potential for human error in those processes, and it will also streamline those processes. So those plans we've identified based on the priorities in place. We believe we will be able to start work on those in the last quarter of this calendar year, and that is why that step is the one that is remaining open. So those were the steps that we have taken for the first recommendation. The second and third recommendations kind of go hand in hand. The second recommendation, as Mr. Brogley mentioned, was to implement a review of vendor additions and changes within Oracle, subject to any constraints in the third recommendation. The third recommendation was to identify additional reports that could be created that would help facilitate that review. So if I take those things in reverse order, and to give you a little bit of additional background, the way the data is updated to our vendor file, there are two ways that data is updated. One, as Mr. Brogley was referring to, in our central vendor registration system, which is our front-end system available to vendors or potential vendors, they enter all of their information in that system. That generates a read-only file that is then subject to due diligence and various reviews by accounts payable. If accounts payable finds issues in their reviews, they pull those transactions out. The remainder of the verified updates from that read-only file gets sent to Oracle. So there's no ability to manipulate that read-only file. The transaction stays on it or it gets pulled off. To complete that thought, for transactions that have issues identified with them or that need clarification, our staff will go back to the vendor, request clarification, and the vendor goes back in the front-end system to make corrections or to provide additional information. So to the extent that those read-only transactions are interfaced to Oracle, there's no ability to modify them. There are limited other situations, though, where we may manually make changes to the system, or for example, for banking information. We have a separate process in place for vendors to submit their banking information if they would like payments made automatically, so that we can subject that process to additional due diligence and verification procedures. And so those do not run through the front-end system, and those we provide manual updates to the system. So in terms of the reports to be generated for Audit Trail, we worked with the ERP group in the TEBS department to identify reports that can be created, and we identified all key fields in the vendor file that would be fields that, if they were adjusted or modified, will change where either a paper check gets generated or to whom, and where an automated payment gets generated or to whom. And we have implemented those reports, and they are in process. We also then, as part of that, it segregates out the transactions that are generated automatically by interface versus the transactions that are manually updated. And we have implemented a daily supervisory review of all of the individual transactions that are made into the system, including a review of the supporting documentation used behind those transactions. So that explains the corrective actions that we have taken under the second and third recommendations, which are items 1-2 and 2-1. If you then move to recommendation 4-1, so part of the issue with, which was to ensure existing policies and procedures specify the review and document retention requirements. The issues that were really identified during the audit had to do with procedures that were being performed, but the documentation of those procedures might not necessarily have been consistently maintained each time they were performed, or the documentation wasn't stored in the same location consistently so that we could provide it for review. So upon the issuance of those recommendations, we immediately communicated changes to our operational procedures to the staff responsible for those reviews, and then we followed that with an update to the procedures that we already had in place. And those include, on the front end, as Mr. Broglie was mentioning, we have a vendor setup procedure that is used by our staff in their processing. And then we have at the back end a vendor inactivation policy. And we have updated both of those for the document retention policies that are in place and that should be followed. Recommendation 4-2 was to consider developing checklists or tools as part of any of the other policy and procedure changes that we are making. And we did consider that throughout, and we did implement checklists or checklist tools as part of the final recommendation. So the final recommendation, 5-1, as Mr. Broglie mentioned, has to do with ethics holds. So ethics holds are where one of the risks is if your employee is in the vendor file, are they there for an appropriate reason? So what we have done is a more detailed review and identification of the specific ways when we compare our employee file to our vendor file, the specific fields that we may run across a match for. And that could be the name matches, the address matches, or the bank account matches. If the name matches, we want to make sure that the reason that the employee is in the system, a vendor system, is a valid one. And so we do due diligence over why they are in the vendor system. There are certain situations where that are absolutely valid, but there are other situations where an employee should, for example, have approval of the Ethics Commission. So in those cases, we go back to the employee and we require that we put them on an ethics hold. So that means that no department can conduct a transaction in the system with that vendor until they provide us with the documentation from the Ethics Commission that is required under county policy. On the address match, so the address match can be challenging because the most challenging situation we see can involve multifamily addresses, for example, where someone may omit an apartment number or a unit number. And so then we could have an employee in our system whose street address matches a vendor because they are in the same multifamily unit, not because they are because it is the exact same address. So we have a number of due diligence procedures that we perform to determine if this is a multifamily address, if there's additional information we can gather. We also have implemented, and if we cannot resolve that issue, we place the vendor on a ethics hold. If there is a department that at some point in time needs to do business with that vendor, then we have created a checklist of the due diligence that the department must perform at that time and provide us with sufficient evidence that that issue has been resolved, and then we will take that vendor off of ethics hold. And the last situation can be where a bank account number that is set up for an employee's payroll direct deposit matches a vendor's automated banking information. And we have a checklist and due diligence that we would perform in that situation, but to date, we haven't run across that situation. So that is a recap. I would just turn at this point to Karen Smith to say, do you think I've overlooked anything significant?
No, you did great.
Okay. So I will stop at that point, and I don't know if you want to hear from procurement on the last recommendation before you ask us any questions.
Sure, we might as well go through all of it.
Hi, I'm Melissa Garner. I'm the Division Chief of Operations with the Office of Procurement. I'm here to address finding number 3 in regards to the Dun & Bradstreet evaluations and the recommendation that was made to develop and implement a process where the departments would need to consider a Dun & Bradstreet report when determining responsibility. At the time, a department is responsible to perform responsiveness and responsibility checks prior to the recommendation of award. There are many tools that the departments currently have. Introducing the Dun & Bradstreet is something that we are looking into how we can implement that. The current opportunities or tools that they have for that responsibility check is related to doing general performance reviews, checking SStat for their state, where they are with the state, if there are any concerns there, and depending upon the scope of whatever the work may be, that the solicitation that they're working on, there could be a need to check equipment and everything like that. So taking this to a financial review takes it a little bit further. We do currently have in our terms and conditions, there's requirements that allow us to check their financial stability and documentation and their accounting system. And we, in the regulations, it's also state that it gives the expectations for the responsibility check, to which on the financial side of it, it also states we would work with the Department of Finance in order to make sure that any of the accounting systems or concerns are addressed adequately, because having the responsibility out in the departments for these reviews, they're the subject matter experts. However, they may not be finance experts. So that's one thing that we want to be cautious of telling the departments, go use this tool that's out there about finance status without the knowledge of exactly what it's for. So with that being said, the steps that we've taken is we have already collaborated with finance and the Office of the County Attorney to determine multiple factors. One being the legality of using a private company as a tool in order to determine if we can or can't do business with a vendor. Also, the method in which we can work with finance, who holds the Dun & Bradstreet subscription and they are primary users now, and how we implement that throughout the departments and give them access, and how they use it, how we teach them to use it, making sure that it's being used properly in order to get what it is we want out of it and have that opportunity. So the next steps that we're doing, one thing I can say is procurement. We're trying to evaluate all guidance that we currently have out to any of the departments for all aspects of the procurement responsibilities they have. And in doing that, this kind of just ties into work that we were already looking at. We're trying to review any guidance that's out there now, whether it be checklists, forms, manuals, etc., determine what's in there. We've had a lot of efficiency updates over the past year, so we want to make sure that any of that is updated. And so while we're doing that step, where I do have 2 procurement specialists that are working directly on looking at all that, trying to get it updated, we will add this Dun & Bradstreet tool in as an update to those forms and guidance. The next part of it is also working with the Department of Finance to make sure that we implement into our contract administration training the use of it. Again, how to use it, how to access it, etc. And our plan is to have this guidance updated and available as of January 1st, 2024, and have it fully implemented by July 1st of 2024, just so we can make sure that we get the information pushed out to everybody and that everybody is capable of using it in the correct way. That's our status. We have plenty of things to still work on.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that very in-depth report and response. I think we probably know more about our vendor system than a lot more than we did coming into this, which is really important. I think first, Mr. Braylio, as you mentioned in terms of your department and how you are working in partnership, going back and forth on recommendations, making sure they're being fulfilled. Sounds like a great deal of work is being done. Do you see any flags or anything that is outstanding from your perspective at the moment?
The biggest challenge I've seen over the last several years actually is the workload burden on departments. It's not as though they have staff sitting on the bench not doing other things. Most of the recommendations, particularly when it's directed at finance, are complicated issues. As Ms. Hawkins was explaining, the system is complicated, and getting people free up time to think about what makes the most sense and the costs associated with implementing any systems changes. There's not a pool of resources sitting there to do that. And so for me, I push as appropriate on the timeliness of implementation, but I'm also recognizing that challenges of numbers of resources, positions available, key departures of staff, challenges of county filling those staffs. You've already heard enough about that outside this venue. That to me is the biggest challenge that I'm seeing. In terms of the real positive side, particularly the corporate business offices, procurement, finance, county attorney's office, they are great to work with. Very willing and open. I don't think that they have put themselves into a defensive posture with the conduct of the audits or the resulting findings and recommendations that come out. Doesn't mean we always agree, but they're open to looking at opportunities for improvement to enhance and strengthen the control environment that's there.
Great. Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions or anything? No, I just really appreciate all the work and the thorough report, and thank you for this, and welcome. I'm glad you could be with us today. I think that's it for this part, and Mr. Bergulo, if you want to just quickly go over what you sent over on June 1st to the Council President for your work plan for FY24.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've always done an audit plan looking at over the next year, 2 years in some cases, because some of our audit focus areas aren't things that will be wrapped up in 1 year's time. The plan that we sent over middle of May identified 3 focus areas. One, we want to do a current state assessment of the county's enterprise research planning ERP system. The system is approximately 14 years old. It's undergone numerous enhancements and changes during that time period. ERP is obviously a critical core business system for the county and to support ongoing county operations. And we felt it was appropriate and timely. Maybe it should have been done earlier, but here we are to take a look at the current state of that system and its associated processes, including resourcing and training and change management, etc. The second audit focus area is over the past several years, we've conducted IT risk assessments that have been focused primarily on TEBS and their processes, because our view was, let's try and make sure that the core enterprise processes are strong before we then go out into individual departments and look at how are they administering their roles in the process. So with the governance review being wrapped up shortly, hopefully, we'll be focusing over the next, I think, couple years, looking at department level audits, particularly focused on IT and data security management. Third focus area is on non-IT enterprise-wide operations and programs. We had done in 2020 again an enterprise level review of the county's purchasing card program. The intention always was to be able to get out into individual departments and look at their administration of that department. There's nothing that we heard today, or as we knew that the IG was focusing on this in another venue, that if anything, it emphasized the importance of doing this department level review because of, not because we've got specific concerns there, but of the potential of concerns there. So we'll be focusing on that. We're still in the process of identifying which specific departments in individual years we'll be focusing on. Again, I think this will span 24 into 25 and potentially beyond, depending on how easily we're able to move through things. And then finally, the county has a category of procurements called informal solicitations and procurements. They're between $10,000 in value and $100,000 in value. A lot of the administration of the awarding of those informal procurements, informal solicitations, while the actual award is made by the Office of Procurement, most everything leading up to the award is done in individual departments. So again, not because I have specific problems that have been identified and brought to my attention, but because of the potential. We wanted to take a look at what are the controls and what's the control environment that the Office of Procurement has established there, and then how in individual departments are informal procurements and solicitations being administered, and are there issues there that warrant attention and improvements going forward. So that's our planned focus for next year. I always caveat that things can change. Unexpected issues can come up that would bump these, not off the plate entirely, but down the road to a subsequent year. But this is the plan for next year, and any questions or feedback, much appreciated.
Great. Well, thank you. Personally, I think this looks like a good plan, and I will just flag for you that on government operations and fiscal policy, we will be doing a session probably in early fall with Director Shetty on procurement items and talking about that department and how it's operating. I've already begun conversations with him about bringing that to Government Operations Committee and discussing it. So it might complement some of the work that you're doing. Do my colleagues have any feedback or anything? No, I think we're all good. Thank you, Mr. Bergoglio, for the presentation. Mr. Fazio, thank you for pulling this all together today, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and seeing folks back at the next Audit Committee meeting.
Thanks again for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right, we need to take a 5-minute break for them to do the technology thing, the switch. They do. They need to switch. But if folks want to come on down for Government Operations Committee meeting, we will start that at 11:25.
But nobody asks whether men really belong in the service.